Self-doubt is a quiet force. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you that maybe you're not ready yet, that someone else could do it better, that failure would be too costly. It disguises itself as logic, convincing you that playing small is smart, that staying comfortable is wise. But the truth is, self-doubt isn't protecting you. It's preventing you from discovering what you're truly capable of. It builds invisible walls around your potential and convinces you those walls are safety. The problem is, safety doesn't create growth. Comfort doesn't lead to fulfillment. The voice of self-doubt will always try to keep you where you are, not because it hates you, but because it fears change. When we allow self-doubt to dictate our choices, we start shrinking our world to fit our fears. We choose silence over speaking up, hesitation over action, and settling over striving. The tragedy is that every time we surrender to doubt, we reinforce it. We prove to ourselves that maybe it was right, that we really couldn't, that we really shouldn't. But the same process works in reverse. Every time you act in spite of doubt, you prove it wrong. You show yourself that fear is a poor predictor of reality. Confidence doesn't come from erasing fear. It comes from repeatedly disproving the lies it tells you. Self-doubt loves to visit us in moments of opportunity. Just when something new or meaningful presents itself, that's when insecurity gets louder. Why? Because it senses risk. It senses potential failure, rejection, embarrassment, but that's also how it signals importance. The greater the fear, the greater the growth waiting on the other side. What feels like a reason to stop is actually a reason to continue. Fear is simply information that you're about to step into something that matters. When you learn to interpret it that way, you stop running from it and start walking with it. Too many of us wait for a magical moment when we'll feel ready. We imagine that once we gain enough experience, confidence will finally appear. But confidence doesn't precede action, it follows it. The only way to feel ready is to begin before you are. You build readiness by doing. You gain strength by showing up. Every expert you've ever admired once stood exactly where you are now, uncertain, anxious, doubting their worth. The difference is that they acted before they believed. They trusted the process long enough for belief to catch up. Self-doubt convinces us to seek permission. We crave someone else's validation, a sign that it's okay to move forward. We think that approval will dissolve the uncertainty, but it never does, because no one else can give you the permission you're waiting for. No one can replace the quiet conviction that must come from within. The moment you realize that permission is self-granted is the moment you become free. It's not arrogance to believe in yourself, it's responsibility. The world doesn't benefit when you hide what you can offer. The irony of self-doubt is that it often strikes hardest in those who care the most. People who want to do good, to make an impact, to bring something meaningful into the world, they tend to question themselves deeply. That questioning is a sign of integrity, not inadequacy, but there's a difference between reflection and paralysis. Healthy self-awareness sharpens you, unhealthy self-doubt silences you. The goal isn't to eliminate doubt, but to master your relationship with it, to hear it without obeying it. Each time you let doubt win, it becomes stronger. Each time you face it down, you becomes stronger. The process is slow, often uncomfortable, but transformative. You start realizing that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward in its presence. You stop measuring progress by how confident you feel and start measuring it by how often you act despite your insecurity. That shift changes everything. When you look back, you'll notice that the moments that changed your life weren't the ones where you felt sure. They were the ones where you felt scared and moved anyway. Growth doesn't come wrapped in certainty. It comes wrapped in discomfort, in resistance, in moments that test you. But each of those moments teaches you something vital, that you can handle more than you thought, that your strength expands with every challenge you face. Self-doubt may always be a companion, but it doesn't have to be a commander. It's part of being human to question, to wonder, to worry. What matters is that you don't let those thoughts dictate your direction. You can listen without surrendering. You can feel the fear and still take the step. Over time, that practice rewires your belief system. The voice of doubt gets quieter and the voice of possibility gets louder. So when that familiar whisper comes, the one that says you can't, you're not enough, or you'll fail, pause, breathe, and recognize it for what it is, fear masquerading as logic. Then take one small, defiant step forward. Because every time you do, you weaken the grip of doubt and strengthen the muscle of confidence. It's in those quiet, deliberate choices that you reclaim your power, one brave moment at a time. Confidence is often misunderstood as a natural gift, something a lucky few are born with. We look at people who speak effortlessly, lead boldly, or take risks without hesitation and assume they've always been that way. But confidence is not a genetic trait, it's a gradual construction, built one experience, one decision, one failure at a time. It's not a switch that turns on when the stars align. It's a result of consistent, deliberate action taken in the presence of fear. Every single confident person you admire once stood in uncertainty, questioning their worth, their ability, and their direction. What separates them from those still trapped by doubt is not talent, but persistence. When you first start building confidence, it feels uncomfortable. The early stages are filled with awkwardness, second guessing, and the haunting feeling that you're faking it. But that's precisely how it's supposed to feel. Growth never feels natural at the beginning. Think of learning to ride a bike. The balance only comes after the falls. You don't wait until you're steady to start pedaling. You start pedaling so you can learn to balance. The same principle applies to confidence. You must act before you feel sure. The courage to start always precedes the comfort of mastery. Confidence is not built in moments of ease, but in moments of friction. When you choose to speak up despite your shaking voice, when you take the opportunity despite the risk of failure, when you stand in a room full of people who might not believe in you and hold your ground, those are the bricks that build confidence. Every act of courage, no matter how small, adds to the foundation. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from proving, again and again, that imperfection doesn't define you. We often mistake confidence for arrogance, but they are nothing alike. Arrogance is the mask of insecurity, the fragile shield that hides fear behind superiority. Confidence, on the other hand, is quiet strength. It doesn't need to announce itself because it's grounded in self-trust, not in comparison. True confidence allows you to celebrate others without feeling diminished. It gives you the freedom to say, "I don't know," without shame, because your worth isn't tied to appearing flawless. It's rooted in the knowledge that you can learn, adapt, and grow. Every time you take a step into the unknown, you gather evidence that you can handle uncertainty, that you can navigate difficulty, that you can recover from failure. This evidence becomes the foundation of genuine confidence. It's not about eliminating fear, but proving to yourself that you can move through it. When you start viewing fear as an opportunity to collect more evidence, doubt loses its power. You begin to realize that the only way to strengthen belief in yourself is to keep showing up, even when it's uncomfortable. The moments you least feel confident are often the most important ones. They're the tests that reveal your capacity to act without validation. Anyone can move forward when the path is clear and the support is guaranteed. Real confidence is built when you take a step and the ground is still forming beneath your feet. That's when you start to trust not the outcome, but yourself, your resourcefulness, your resilience, your ability to figure things out along the way. It's that inner trust that becomes unshakable over time. Confidence is also cumulative. It doesn't arrive all at once. It compounds like interest. Each small act of courage multiplies your belief in yourself. You might start with something small, speaking up in a meeting, sharing an idea, setting a boundary. At first, it feels insignificant, but every small victory reinforces the message that you can rely on yourself. Over time, these moments stack up, creating a sense of stability that no setback can fully erase. The person you become through those small acts is someone who no longer waits for certainty, they create it. It's important to understand that confidence is deeply personal. What builds it for one person may not build it for another. Some gain it through mastery of a skill, others through overcoming hardship. But for everyone, the essence remains the same. Confidence comes from experience earned, not reassurance received. You can't think your way into confidence, you have to act your way into it. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to build it. Every risk you take is a chance to strengthen it. And every mistake you survive is a reminder that you can handle more than you thought. The process of building confidence is lifelong. It doesn't end when you achieve success or recognition. Each new level of growth brings new doubts, new fears, new uncertainties. The difference is that with each challenge, you carry with you the memory of the times you've been brave before. That memory becomes your armor. It tells you, I've done hard things before. I can do them again. The muscle of confidence never disappears. It just needs to be exercised regularly through action and self-trust. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the byproduct of persistence. It's what happens when you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start building evidence that you are enough, right now as you are. You don't find confidence waiting in the wings of certainty. You create it on the stage of vulnerability. You earn it through the process of living fully, trying boldly, and failing gracefully. It's a lifelong construction, one decision, one action, one act of courage at a time. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions we experience, and yet it is one of the most misunderstood. We're often taught to see fear as a warning sign, something that tells us to stop, to retreat, to protect ourselves from danger. But most of the time, fear isn't a reflection of real danger, it's a reflection of potential growth. When you feel fear before a presentation, before making a big decision, before stepping into a new challenge, that fear is not telling you to avoid the situation. It's signaling that something meaningful is at stake. Fear appears in the same moments that matter most, the moments where your actions have the power to shape your life. When you begin to understand that fear is information, not an enemy, your entire relationship with it changes. You start to realize that fear is often pointing you toward exactly where you need to go. It's a compass that identifies areas of growth, opportunities for learning, and spaces where you're about to evolve. The intensity of your fear is often in direct proportion to the importance of the thing you're facing. It's not trying to stop you, it's trying to get your attention, and once you can see fear this way, it loses its grip. It becomes less of a wall and more of a doorway. We live in a world that glorifies comfort, but comfort is deceptive. It tells us that if we just stay where we are, nothing bad will happen. But in that same stillness, nothing great will happen either. Comfort creates a false sense of safety that quietly limits potential. Fear, on the other hand, is an invitation to step into discomfort, to stretch, to learn, to grow. The people who achieve extraordinary things are not fearless. They are those who have learned to recognize fear as a natural part of progress. They have trained themselves to act not because of the absence of fear, but because they understand what lies beyond it. Fear and insecurity often appear together, working in tandem to hold us back. Insecurity whispers that you are not enough, and fear amplifies it by painting pictures of failure, rejection, and loss. But if you pause long enough to look beneath that noise, you'll find that these emotions are built from imagination, not reality. They are projections of what might go wrong, rarely what will. The mind creates elaborate stories of catastrophe, but those stories dissolve the moment you take action. Fear can't survive in motion. It only thrives in stillness when we give it space to grow in our thoughts. The key to transforming fear into progress is not resistance but awareness. When fear shows up, notice it without judgment. Ask yourself, what is this fear trying to tell me? Often, it's highlighting something you deeply value, a dream, a goal, a person, an opportunity. Fear arises because you care. That means it's not your enemy. It's proof that you're aligned with something meaningful. Once you recognize that, fear stops being a reason to retreat and becomes a signal to lean in closer. The feeling doesn't disappear, but it becomes manageable. You stop fighting it and start moving with it. There's a misconception that courage means being unafraid, but that's never true. Courage means being fully aware of the fear and choosing to act anyway. It's about standing in the same space as fear and refusing to give it control. Every time you do that, you teach your brain something new, that fear isn't fatal, that discomfort won't destroy you, that anxiety doesn't dictate your ability to succeed. Over time, this practice redefines your relationship with fear. It stops being a signal to stop and starts being a familiar companion on the road to progress. Every major step forward in life begins with fear. Every innovation, every new relationship, every transformation carries the same tremor of uncertainty. That nervous energy you feel before doing something new is not a flaw, it's fuel. It's your mind and body preparing for expansion. The goal isn't to get rid of fear, but to harness it, to use it as momentum instead of a barrier. The greatest creators, leaders, and thinkers throughout history felt fear deeply, but they learned to move forward in spite of it. Their bravery was not a lack of fear, but mastery over how they responded to it. There's a simple truth about fear that we often overlook. It only grows when ignored. The more you avoid it, the more power it gains. But when you turn toward it, when you face the thing that scares you, it starts to shrink. The anticipation is almost always worse than the reality. The presentation goes better than expected. The conversation is easier than imagined. The challenge feels smaller once you're in motion. Action dismantles fear's illusion. Movement is the antidote to paralysis. When you start, fear begins to lose its shape. Fear thrives on uncertainty, but so does possibility. The two are inseparable. Every time you move towards something uncertain, you open the door to both risk and reward. The key is not to eliminate uncertainty, it's to trust yourself within it. The presence of fear doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. Often, it means you're exactly where you need to be. It means you're alive, engaged, and on the edge of growth. When you see fear through that lens, it stops feeling like an obstacle and starts feeling like evidence that you're doing something that matters. Fear is not the end of courage, but the beginning of it. It's the signal that you're stepping into something new, something bigger than what you've known. The feeling of fear is proof that you're challenging the limits of your comfort zone. When you accept that fear will always walk beside you in every new chapter, every big decision, every meaningful pursuit, you stop trying to silence it. You simply learn to walk forward with it, hand in hand, and that's where transformation truly begins. From the moment we're young, we're conditioned to seek approval. We learn to wait for a nod from a teacher, a parent, a boss, someone who tells us we're doing well, that we're on the right path, that we're allowed to move forward. This habit grows with us, becoming an invisible leash that ties our sense of worth to the opinions of others. We hesitate to act, to speak, or to create until we're sure someone else will approve. We tell ourselves that we're just being cautious, but really, we're waiting for permission to be ourselves, to take risks, to pursue what we want. The hardest truth to accept is that the permission we crave will never come from anyone else. It has to come from within. We spend so much of our lives looking outward for validation. We ask, is this good enough? Am I good enough? We scroll through other people's lives, comparing our progress to theirs, measuring our worth by how we think we stack up. But no amount of external approval can replace internal conviction. The people who move forward, who create change, who make an impact, they do not wait for someone to tell them they're ready. They decide, they act first and let belief catch up later. Waiting for approval is a quiet form of self-sabotage. It's the illusion that you're being patient when, in truth, you're standing still. we often mistake humility for hesitation. We think holding back is a sign of being grounded or realistic, when in fact it's often a sign of fear. True humility is not about downplaying your worth. It's about recognizing your strengths without arrogance and your weaknesses without shame. The moment you stop waiting for others to recognize your potential and start recognizing it yourself, everything changes. The power shifts, you stop chasing validation and start creating momentum. The world begins to respond not because you waited for its approval, but because you acted with intention. When you seek permission from others, you place your power in their hands. You allow their opinions to dictate your progress. You let their fears become your limitations. But the truth is, no one knows your potential better than you do. No one else has lived your story, carried your experiences, or felt the fire that burns inside you. Others can guide you, advise you, even support you, but they cannot define you. The authority to begin to take a step to try and fail and try again belongs solely to you. You are the only one who can grant yourself that freedom. The need for permission often comes from a place of fear, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood. But no matter how carefully you seek approval, there will always be someone who disagrees, someone who doesn't see what you see. If you make your decisions based on avoiding disapproval, you'll spend your life editing yourself to fit into other people's expectations. You'll dilute your own potential until there's nothing left that truly belongs to you. Freedom begins the moment you stop living for the applause and start living for alignment. There's something liberating about realizing that no one else is coming to tell you it's time. No mentor, no boss, no friend will ever hand you a perfect moment to begin. The people who seem fearless aren't waiting for permission. They've simply accepted that uncertainty will always exist. They've learned that readiness is a choice, not a state of being. They act not because they feel completely prepared, but because they know waiting won't make them more so. Action, not approval, is what creates growth. When you stop asking for permission, you start to build trust with yourself. Every decision you make on your own terms becomes a small declaration of independence. You start realizing that you don't need someone to validate your choices, your dreams, or your worth. This self-trust becomes your foundation. It's what allows you to keep going when things get difficult, when others doubt you, or when the outcome isn't clear. The moment you begin to rely on your own judgment, you step into the fullest version of who you are meant to be. It's easy to underestimate how much time we lose waiting to feel ready, waiting for the right conditions, waiting for someone to notice our potential. But time doesn't pause while we hesitate. The opportunity you're delaying today may not wait for you tomorrow. The dream you keep postponing slowly fades with each day you spend waiting for approval. You don't need permission to chase it. You just need the courage to begin, even if your voice shakes, even if your steps are small. The act of starting is what turns uncertainty into clarity. There will always be people who doubt you, people who project their own limitations onto you. They may tell you that your goals are too ambitious, that your timing is wrong, that you should play it safe. But their doubts are not your truth. Their perspective is shaped by their own fears, their own experiences. You can listen to their words without absorbing their limitations. You can respect their opinions without surrendering your direction. The key is to remember that no one else carries the vision that lives inside you, only you do, and that makes it yours to bring to life. When you stop asking for permission, you stop living as a version of yourself shaped by others' expectations. You begin to make decisions based on your values, your intuition, your vision. You discover that freedom isn't given, it's claimed. You start to move, to create, to express, not because someone told you it was okay, but because you decided it was time. That decision, that quiet, powerful decision, becomes the moment everything begins to change. Failure has a way of humbling us. It strips away our illusions of control, our carefully built plans, and our expectations of how things should go. It doesn't ask for permission to arrive, it simply does. Yet, for most of us, failure feels like the ultimate proof that we're not enough, that our efforts were wasted, that we've lost something we can't recover. We're taught to fear it, to avoid it at all costs, as if it's the opposite of success. But failure is not the end of the road. It's part of the path itself. Every person who has achieved anything meaningful has walked through failure, stumbled through it, and emerged changed because of it. When we fail, what we're really experiencing is feedback. It's the world's way of showing us what doesn't work, of refining our understanding, of teaching us resilience. But instead of seeing it that way, we attach shame to it. We take it personally, as if a failed attempt means we are failures ourselves. That's where growth stops. The difference between those who evolve and those who stay stuck is not in the number of failures they experience, but in how they interpret them. Those who learn to see failure as a teacher, not a verdict, use it as fuel to keep moving forward. Failure builds strength in ways success never could. Success can be comfortable. It validates what you already know. But failure pushes you into discomfort, forcing you to stretch, adapt, and innovate. It challenges your assumptions and confronts your ego. It teaches you humility and patience. It reminds you that growth is not linear, and that mastery is born from persistence, not perfection. Every failure is a rehearsal for resilience. Each one toughens your spirit, sharpens your focus, and prepares you for something bigger. What's most painful about failure isn't the event itself, but the story we tell ourselves afterward. We replay the moment in our minds over and over, amplifying the embarrassment or regret. We convince ourselves that everyone is watching, that our mistakes define us, that we've ruined our chance. But the truth is, most people aren't keeping score. They're too busy fighting their own battles. The only one holding on to your failure long after it's past is you. The sooner you release the story that failure makes you unworthy, the sooner you can use it as the lesson it was meant to be. There's a quiet kind of power in people who have failed often. They walk differently, not arrogantly, but with a grounded confidence that only comes from having been tested. They've learned that falling isn't fatal, that rejection doesn't destroy them, that disappointment is temporary. These people understand that success isn't about avoiding failure, but about mastering recovery. They don't let one setback define them because they've proven to themselves that they can get back up again and again. That kind of resilience can't be taught. It can only be earned through experience. Failure has another hidden gift, clarity. When things don't go as planned, it forces you to ask hard questions. Was this truly what I wanted? Was I moving in the right direction? Was my effort aligned with my values? Sometimes failure isn't a punishment, it's redirection. It's life's way of steering you away from something that wasn't meant for you, something that would have limited you in ways you couldn't yet see. When you stop fighting failure and start listening to what it's trying to tell you, it becomes one of the most honest teachers you'll ever have. It's easy to romanticize success stories and forget the long trail of failures that came before them. Every innovation, every masterpiece, every breakthrough was built on a foundation of trial and error. Behind every accomplishment are moments of doubt, rejection, and near surrender. We often admire the outcome, but overlook the process. Yet it's in the process, in the repeated attempts, the constant adjustments, the willingness to try again, that true growth happens. Those who embrace failure as part of the process don't just achieve success, they build the character to sustain it. Failure strips away pretenses. It forces authenticity. When you fail, you meet yourself without filters, your fears, your pride, your resilience, your determination. It's an invitation to rebuild, not from who you think you should be, but from who you truly are. In that rebuilding, you find strength that isn't dependent on achievement or recognition. You learn to measure yourself not by your victories, but by your capacity to keep showing up. You start to realize that every setback you survive adds another layer to your depth, another reason to believe in your ability to endure. The more you experience failure, the less power it holds over you. It becomes familiar, almost predictable. You start to see patterns, how every collapse eventually leads to a new beginning, how every closed door pushes you toward a better one. You learn that survival itself is success. That lesson changes everything. You stop fearing mistakes because you know you can handle them. You stop hesitating because you trust your ability to recover. In time, the fear of failure transforms into respect for what it brings: knowledge, resilience, and perspective. Failure is not a signal to stop, but an invitation to continue differently. It's proof that you're in motion, that you're testing your limits, that you're brave enough to try. People who never fail are people who never risk, and people who never risk rarely grow. Every failure you face, no matter how painful, carries within it the seed of transformation. It's a reminder that progress doesn't come from perfection. It comes from persistence, from trying, from learning, from refusing to let the story end when things don't go as planned. Belief is often mistaken for the starting point of action. We tell ourselves that once we believe in our abilities, once we feel confident enough, once we're sure of the outcome, then we'll take the step. But the truth is, belief rarely comes first. Action is what creates belief. You don't think your way into confidence, you earn it through experience. You can read every motivational book, listen to every inspiring story, and still feel paralyzed until you take that first uncertain step. The moment you act, even if it's clumsy, hesitant, or imperfect, you begin to collect proof that you're capable, and that proof becomes the foundation of belief. Action has a way of silencing the endless noise of doubt. When you're stuck in your head, fear grows louder with every thought. You imagine every possible outcome, every potential failure, every judgment that could come your way. But when you act, even in the smallest way, that noise starts to fade. The mind can only spin in circles when you're standing still. The moment you move, reality replaces imagination. You stop thinking about what could happen and start engaging with what is happening. That's where progress begins, not in the planning, but in the doing. So many people spend their lives waiting for certainty. They believe that once they feel ready, everything will align perfectly. But readiness is an illusion. No one ever feels fully prepared for the things that truly matter. Every major change, every act of courage, every meaningful pursuit begins with uncertainty. The difference between those who move forward and those who stay stuck isn't knowledge or talent. It's the willingness to act in the absence of certainty. Each small action you take plants a seed of confidence, and over time, those seeds grow into belief. Action also reshapes how you see yourself. Each time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how minor, you send a message to your brain that you can be trusted. You begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself, one promise at a time. That integrity creates inner strength. Confidence doesn't come from convincing yourself that you're capable. It comes from proving it. When you keep your word to yourself, when you act despite fear, when you choose consistency over comfort, your identity starts to shift. You no longer see yourself as someone who hesitates. You start seeing yourself as someone who acts. The beauty of action is that it doesn't require perfection. You don't have to know every step before you begin. You don't need a flawless plan or a guaranteed outcome. All you need is movement. Every step you take creates new information, new opportunities, new clarity. What felt impossible in theory often becomes manageable once you start. Action turns abstract fear into tangible experience. You discover that the monster in your mind was never as big as you imagined it to be, and that discovery alone builds belief faster than any pep talk ever could. Action transforms insecurity into momentum. When you're focused on motion, you stop measuring yourself by where you are and start valuing yourself for moving forward. Even when you fail, you're still further ahead than when you started. Failure in that context becomes progress in disguise. The act of doing reshapes your emotional landscape. It turns anxiety into focus, fear into adrenaline, and hesitation into energy. That's the secret of those who seem unstoppable. They don't wait for motivation. They create it through action. Action also creates connection. When you take initiative, you start to attract people, opportunities, and experiences that align with your movement. Doors begin to open because motion signals direction. People respond to energy, and energy is created through effort. By simply doing something, sending the email, starting the project, sharing your idea, you signal to the world that you're serious. That signal brings momentum you could never find while waiting for the perfect moment. Movement creates visibility, and visibility creates opportunity. The relationship between action and belief is cyclical. The more you act, the more you believe. The more you believe, the more you act. Each reinforces the other in a continuous loop of growth. It's not a straight line. There will be setbacks, doubts, and pauses, but every time you return to action, you strengthen that cycle. The people who achieve long-term success aren't those who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who know how to return to movement even when they do. They've learned that action is the bridge between fear and confidence, between uncertainty and progress. When you look back at the times you grew the most, they always began with a moment of movement. You didn't have all the answers, but you acted anyway. You tried, you learned, you adjusted, and somewhere in that process, belief took root. It's never the grand gestures that build confidence. It's the accumulation of small, deliberate steps. Each one becomes a vote of belief in your future self. You can't think your way into becoming the person you want to be. You have to act your way into it. Action doesn't eliminate fear or erase doubt. It simply proves that those feelings don't control you. Every time you choose movement over hesitation, you reclaim a little more of your power. You begin to see that belief isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. Through each step, each attempt, each imperfect try, you create evidence that you can. And once you've collected enough of that evidence, doubt loses its authority, and belief becomes not a wish, but a fact you've earned through action.